So welcome everyone to this network call of November. I won't be talking very much, but I'll just leave the floor to Marie Kreil and Verena Kontschieder. They are from opendata Germany and opendata.ch, our Swiss chapter, and they will present you Prototype Fund. We decided basically to present Prototype Fund because it's a very successful project, but it's also a successful example of replication of projects inside the network. So Prototype Fund was funded by the German chapter together with the German ministry, and basically Open Knowledge, the Open Knowledge chapter in Switzerland, so opendata.ch replicated the project very successfully, which is now basically a project in Switzerland as well. I won't go into details about that. I'll leave the floor first to Marie Kreil to start presenting Prototype Fund in Germany. Marie, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I just started sharing my screen. I hope it works. I'm not a Zoom professional. Let me know if I do something wrong. Hi, my name is Marie Kreil. I'm one of the two directors of Prototype Fund Germany. My colleague Patricia cannot be there, unfortunately, today. So I'll be presenting Prototype Fund. So we're in a quite special situation right now. As a disclaimer, we are just closing our 8-year funding period, and we are setting up new structures. So I'll try to make clear what's more the first fund and what's going to be the new fund. But if there are any questions, we have a Q&A to clarify. I hope it'll be clear. It's a bit confusing at the moment at Prototype Fund Germany. First, we are a project of Open Knowledge Foundation Germany. We're one of many larger projects, like you maybe know, Jugendhakt auf Hakt den Staat, also from our chapter. And we are completely funded by the German Federal Ministry for Education and Research, that is providing all the funds for us to run the fund and for the grantees of Prototype Fund. In a nutshell, what we have been saying until now, the catchphrase we used is we fund public interest tech. The idea is that there is a lot of knowledge in communities, in local communities here in Germany, in open source, because we fund exclusively open source software, and that current funding structures at the time where Prototype Fund was started were only set up to fund companies or organizations, NGOs, all that kind of stuff. And there was no way to give money to all these either single persons or very small groups of people that were locally very active in open source. I wasn't there at the beginning, so I'm not going to tell the whole origin story in detail because I just wasn't there. As far as I know, there's a person from the community that was invited at a panel, on a panel, and there was someone from the ministry there, and they said, hey, it would be cool to do that. And the person from the ministry said, write down something, and they did, and they got Open Knowledge Foundation on board very early, because as a one person cannot write such an application. Big applications with ministries are extremely complex. And so this person wrote together with Open Knowledge Foundation the first proposal for Prototype Fund, and we've been existing since 2016. I brought a few key facts just so you have an idea of how large Prototype Fund is and what it's done in the last years without going in details. So you can get at Prototype Fund 6-month funding period. Everyone starts together, everyone ends together. It's really a class feeling. We have funded 16 rounds, or we are currently funding our 16th round, which was scheduled to be the last one, and with approximately 25 projects per round and almost 50,000 euro per project, and almost 400 projects, that comes over 16 millions in funding. Sounds big, it's a lot of people, but we've not funded them all at the same time, fortunately. So this has just slowly grown, because one of the cool things is that we've been able to sustainably build Prototype Fund and improve it. We've received over 4,000 applications. All applications are always read by the whole team. So at this point, we know a lot of ideas of a lot of people. It's always one of the fun parts. Our funding areas until now have been civic tech, data literacy, infrastructure, and security. So that's a very, very wide funding scope. If you think about prototype fund, you can think about very deep Linux kernel infrastructure and dots on a map projects and apps and everything that has been done in open source, all type of projects we have had, as long as they were not too large for prototype fund, because 60K in 6 months is smaller than other established funders like the Open Technology Fund, for example. The idea is that we have very lightweight funding structures. The idea is that as an individual, you can apply for prototype fund without having professional grant writing help, that you can manage this as a very small team or even alone, because as said, we were trying to find expertise in civil society, and if we may put the barriers to enter prototype fund too high, we will not be able to support our communities. And the whole idea, as said, was to have easy access to public funding. The way we fund, we as a team, is that for a funder, we consider it quite hands-on. There are funders that just give you the money and then ask for a very big report at the end, or even in the middle and one at the end. We have noticed that because we provide quite small amounts of funding for short periods, that the barriers are very low to enter prototype fund. We have a lot of people that have never been funded in any other context before. We have people coming out of their normal jobs that I think I'm hearing an echo, or maybe we can mute the person.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it, sorry.
No worries, I'll keep talking. So the idea was that we can support these people who come out of more normal jobs and are not the classical people who go from grant to grant. Also, a lot of students applied prototype fund. Hey, I've written my master thesis about this and this topic. Now I'd like to write the code to build the app. Is a very, very common application at prototype fund. And to support these people who are for the first time doing their own project, we needed to set some kind of support. So we have regular reporting. It's very lightweight. It's just a few sentences. But every 2 weeks, we want to hear from the projects just to check on them, see that they're doing okay. It can be a very special time to be funded for the first time also, because you're working on your own. And if you have no colleagues sometimes to talk to, and we're trying to be really there for the project, we also offer one-on-one calls. We have update calls, exchange formats within the funding time where projects present for each other, where they can ask advice to designers about a topic that is set for the call, like branding call. How do we do branding? What are the questions about branding? And we also provide one-on-one coaching with a few partners, the main partner being Superbloom, which I started as a design company, consulting company, but now it does a whole range of topics around open source projects. And of course, we also have some reach, so talking about our projects, be it in talks like this one or on social media, on newsletters, etc., also provides them with some visibility. The prototype fund is built to have space to experiment. While we have these structures, these updates and stuff, there is a lot of flexibility. If you change your milestones, if you notice that something doesn't work, that you need to change your plans, there is space to do all that. There is minimal formal reports. Everything is very informal. There's just one formal report at the end, and we don't pay when you reach a milestone. We pay whatever hours you've done in the last few months. At a set date. So if you're like slower or something doesn't work out, you still get your money because you still put the work in. We also see ourselves as a learning program. The fund itself is an experiment. How can we fund civil society efficiently? We have a big part of what we do is research, because we're officially a research fund. So we write reports about how to fund, about trends in open source. We get a lot of feedback from people we fund. We try to address new target audiences, have a more diverse crowds doing open source, which is always a very, very big challenge. And we see also the fund itself as an example and communication tool, because we can go in policy context and say, look, this works. You can fund civil society, you can fund open source, and you get results. Speaking of results, I brought a few projects. I won't have time to talk too much about them that we have funded. So one of the projects that we funded several times is Nextcloud. Nextcloud is a company. Of course, we didn't fund the company, but it's a company with a community around it. And there's a lot of Nextcloud apps built. If you don't know it, it's basically like Google Drive in open source, and you can put apps on them to have a calendar, to edit your pictures. I don't know if that one actually exists, to have your health data in Nextcloud. That kind of stuff can be added to your Nextcloud, and we've paid for several Nextcloud apps. Another one that you may know that we funded is Mastodon. Of course, we haven't funded the whole of Mastodon. It's a giant project, but they came to us saying we want to do these and these new milestones on top of Mastodon, because we're an innovation project. You always need to say what's going to be new. And we have funded, I think, parts of their iOS app, if I remember well, and some features. Another one, which is a bit nerdier, is OpenMLS. So that's a standard of how to encrypt communications in messaging that is done at a very high level, with Facebook and Cisco and everyone talking about how to do it. To do the future of what Signal basically does to encrypt your messages. And these people wanted to do the first open source implementation of that standard, because that standard is really cool, but you don't want it to only be implemented by Cisco and Facebook. This is our ticket shop for when we do events, and it's actually one that we have funded, and it's a ticket shop that is not gonna try to suck on the data of people who attend your events. It's a very nice open source one. You can self-host it, or you can get them to host it and get either a free version or a better version if you pay for it a bit, and it's fully open source. And I think this is the last project I brought. This is a period tracking app that is open source, and that's not going to steal your data, because health data is super important, and it's very creepy to have to give your data to big companies if you just want to know when your period happens, and that this could be just stored locally on your phone. And that's what the team of Drip did. It also has a whole lot of very feminist features and ways designs in it. It's very nice. This is just a whole bunch of logos of stuff we funded, because we funded so many nice things, and I'm really sorry I can't talk about them all. Like, we have them all on our website. Have a look if you're curious. Now, we're going to change colors, because this is the old prototype font. It's very neon and pop arty, and now we're a bit more adult and a bit more infrastructure-y. So we just announced a few weeks ago that our funding is not expiring in the end. It was supposed to expire early next year, and we're in for 4 more funding rounds. They're a bit longer, so this is actually 4 years of prototype fund. Same funder, still the ministry, same organization, still Open Knowledge Foundation. We still do free and open source software exclusively, and it's still an innovation fund. That's the basics. But our whole goal was to set up new structures to fund in a more sustainable way, because one of the big questions with funding is what happens to the projects after the money expires? How do they continue? And there are a lot of ways to do this in open source. One of them could be set up a business. One of them could be go into a community and have the community maintain it. There are so many relevant ways to do that. We don't want to tell people how to do that, but we want to support them on the way of figuring that out. We have figured out that security and infrastructure are generally more sustainable than funding projects that are more content-based, like dots on a map type of projects that require a big community that keeps updating the data. And we just think we're not the right structure for it, and there are other funds for that. We actually loved supporting a bunch of these projects, but we don't think that we can really help those projects. With infrastructure, we think this very widely. We think projects that are part of ecosystem, think modular, like it can be user-facing, but it contributes to OpenStreetMap, and then we consider it infrastructure. It's like more the whole infrastructure of open source. As we also see innovation in a larger sense, you don't have to invent the crazy new thing. It's just about putting new milestones on something existing or starting something new. What we also added is a second stage. So if you are funded by us for the 6 months, you can apply after the 6 months or during the 6 months to have 4 more months. So the 6 first months are there to build a prototype, and the 4 additional months of second stage are there to make your prototype sustainable either you want to build a business or you want to do some user testing so it's actually usable. You want to do some design, anything that's not code and will help your project survive after funding. That's what that second stage is for. What we also have is that we have more funding for teams. It was up to 50K for 6 months. Now it's up to 100 if you're a team, because we think that bigger teams sometimes help up to 4 people. We can add team members in European countries. We still need, if you are a team, to have a very lightweight company based in Germany that needs to be started after approval, just to have like a German entity, but team members can be based in the rest of Europe. We're also rethinking on how we support projects, new formats, that kind of stuff. That's still very much work in progress. And we are improving our coaching and networking offering. If this applies to you, I know we have people from all around the world and I'd love to be able to support them all, but this is a German ministry and we are mostly still based in Germany. But maybe you know someone, just have a look at our website, new prototype.ch. There is an English version and you can apply until January 2nd for our first funding round. And this is how to contact us. I've talked very fast. I hope I haven't taken away too much time from Verena, because there are several prototype funds, and the second big one is based in Switzerland, and Verena is the right person to present that one.
Thank you, Marie. I'll take over the screen from you. Just a second. Okay, you guys should be all right. You see the screen, right?
Yes.
Perfect. Welcome also from my side. It's a pleasure to introduce the Prototype Fund Switzerland to you. Some of you probably already know it. It's also a special pleasure for me to be part of this call today, because it's my first of those calls, because I've only joined opendata.ch at the beginning of November. So I'm really very new, and I have taken over the Prototype Fund as the new program lead from Florin and team. All right. Let me get it started and introduce you a bit to how it actually all began. As I've just mentioned, I only started, so I also did dig a bit deeper with those who were at the beginning of the Prototype Fund Switzerland. And they have told me that the concept of the Prototype Switzerland was really inspired by the German chapter very much. And it was actually 3 people who were at the inception of the Prototype Fund Switzerland. One of them is called Nikki, and she back then had the role of Florin, who is also in this call today, as far as I know. She was the director of opendata.ch when it all started back then, basically. And the interesting thing was, to me, that it all really started with those 3 people, like 2 beyond Nikki, whereas the other 2, one of them is listed, Torben. He came with a lot of experience in Germany. He's German. He knew about the Prototype Fund Germany. And he then switched to the Mercator Foundation in Switzerland, one of the main foundations actually operating in Switzerland. And what he proposed as well was to get in touch with Nikki and this third person, who I will mention after, to really get the whole Prototype Fund chapter started. That means that the Prototype Fund chapter, unlike the one in Germany, here in Switzerland, is funded by foundations. And the first, that's true up until today. And the first round of the Prototype Fund Switzerland started in September 2020. So the main logic that has been adopted by the Prototype Fund Switzerland from, which probably distinguishes us a bit from Germany is, probably less the cohort-based logic, but Hannes, so the third person in this initial founding members team, he told me really that the idea was to copy the cohort-based logic that is very similar to what we know from accelerators or incubator approaches. And what was very important for him to underline is that, similar to what Marie mentioned, like giving this chance to individuals who probably are not funded by traditional funding schemes, or who have less chance to ask for funding from established structures because of the funding process. He really insisted on underlining that he felt that the prototype fund was like this ramp that was able to lead people to the foundations, aka to financial means, financial support to get ideas started. But yeah, as I mentioned already before, as opposed to Germany, Switzerland is really funded by foundations. And that does not mean, however, that we are not keen on working with the public sector. We do that. And Hannes, like the one of the founders who is listed here, he really underlined as well that he would like to see the governments and the ministry funding our prototype fund. So let's see what Florin and I will be able to do about that as well. So today, the Prototype Fund Switzerland really is well known, I would say, also well known thanks to opendata.ch. And it's well known as this experimental space, as also Marie underlined it, as a place where people can come to receive the right support structure, both regarding funding, but also kind of like having that mindset and the attitude that people then would receive as an in-kind support. And similar, or actually very, very alike with what Germany does, we are supporting open technologies that are supposed to come from civil society, but are also supposed to serve civil society at the same time. So we really want to help solve social problems and kind of like support the common good in Switzerland. And the third point that I've listed here is that we understand ourselves obviously as some kind of collaborative, people-centered and open innovation organization or initiative. But at the same time, we really want to foment and stymie that kind of culture of openness, collaboration, and people-centeredness also within Switzerland. Up until today, by adopting this approach, we have funded projects with 100,000 Swiss francs, also for the duration of 6 months. And what is important for us is that the funding really should be for everyone who comes with an idea, who has a Swiss work permit. That is obviously a condition that is linked to the funding conditions that we have in place with the Swiss foundations. And we also need them to be beyond 18 years old. As I mentioned, next to the funding and also what Marie underlined, we really work with coachings as well and with workshops. And what's important for us is that we provide access to a network of experts, but also to like-minded people, meaning really, again, replicating this accelerator, incubator-like logic of bringing the people in the different teams together. And so far, we have, through this approach, been able to fund or like receive a bit over 160 applications over the past 3 years, as I've mentioned. The people we were able to fund were kind of like from 16 different projects, and it was 100 in total. And out of those 16 projects, 8, so meaning a half of them, has received follow-up funding as well. So funding that went beyond our prototype fund. And the topics we addressed were civic tech and public interest tech so far. Also from me, to conclude this short insight into our Swiss prototype fund, we have the next application round starting actually on the 23rd of the next year, 23rd of January. This time our topic will cover sustainable digitalization and digital sufficiency. Maybe just a word of why we think it's important. So like we really live in this world where digitalization has this tremendous potential of reducing or cutting resources, but at the same time, it remains a controversial issue where we see, ICT technologies consume up to 21% of global energy consumption, for instance, or accounting for 2 to 4% of global GHG emissions, which is equivalent to the aviation industry. So in this kind of like very polarized and not yet really, there are no certain answers, like that sort of environment, we really wanted to take action. and show or demonstrate with ideas what is possible in this realm. And we really wanted to show this this worth of connecting sustainability with tech issues, and at the same time create more of an awareness for this topic of digital sufficiency in the context of digitalization. If you guys have more questions around or about digital sufficiency, you can ask those questions, obviously. But we also have already some texts, an initial intro text on our homepage. Speaking of which, our homepage is prototypefund.ch. Florian also asked me to kindly underline that we have this handbook that you all could have a look at, which you will find also on our homepage under I think it's under projects. And you will probably receive these slides as well, Sarah, right? So everyone has the links available. And last but not least, please always reach out to Florian and myself. You find the email addresses here, and I'm looking forward to discussion with you now.
Thank you very much, Verena, and thank you, Marie, as well. That was very, very great. It's wonderful to hear all the fantastic stuff that we're doing. I don't know if anyone has any questions that they would like to ask.
Sarah, I'm having some, issues with my camera, not able to open my camera. However, I must say that this is a great initiative, and but you have to be in your place, then only one can avail this. But Sarah, in global South, people really are looking for funding, but we don't have such facilities here in India, Bangladesh, Nepal. Anyway, someday it will reach. But Verena and Marie, thank you very much for initiating this thing. Sarah, thank you.
Thank you, Udit.
Thank you. Maybe I can answer one thing. Of course, our handbook doesn't apply in every country, and different countries have different challenges to set up such funds. But the handbook that Verena mentioned, we've written it together, both prototype funds, and it's some guidelines on how to set up such funds locally. Of course, that's easier said than done, but if you ever have an opening in your community with a funder that wants to build something similar in your country, first have a look at that handbook, and second, we're always super happy to consult and support in how to make other new prototype funds and similar structures. We're there if we can support.
That's great, Marie, and thank you. Wonderful idea.
And there's a link in the chat for the handbook. Florian shared it. I have a couple of questions, so I don't know if anyone has. I'll just go so that I can break the ice a little bit. Actually, two questions, but I'll ask them at the same time. One is, Verena, you mentioned that in Switzerland you generally have a theme, and I missed whether in Germany also that is a thing or if it's something special about Switzerland. And the other question was around, so both of you talked very much about sustainability, and a lot of the thing that we see, as well as sometimes open source projects are tied to funding, and then it's kind of like hard to have a more medium and long-term plan. And Marie, you mentioned that at the Prototype Fund Germany, you do a little bit around that. So I just wanted to know if you could share some more insight about that.
Sure, I can start, and then maybe Verena can say some things about how it's done in the Swiss Prototype Fund if she wants. So we did the topic thing in the beginning. I think our first round didn't have a topic, but then the next ones had until round 8. I don't think it did make a lot of sense on the long term to keep them, because we got very established in the community and people had ideas about what they want to apply with next year, and we hadn't released the topic yet, and it was a bit confusing because we could fund stuff that had nothing to do with the topic. So it was like kind of, hello, to this time we're doing this topic, but feel free to ignore it if you have another idea. And this was extremely confusing communication, and in the end we noticed that people were setting their own topics, communities are setting their own topics, and why would we as a funder say this half year the community has to focus on stuff that has to do with security, and what if a community really needs help with doing some projects related to something totally different at that moment. So we don't do them anymore. What we still do is looking what the trends are and writing about what the trends are on our blog, that kind of stuff, but without having a topic for the round. Your second question was about sustainability. I think this is one of the largest questions for all funders that we will not solve anytime soon. It's like, how do you fund projects, but somehow you also don't want them to be dependent on your funding for the rest of time, but you also want them to exist for as long as they're needed. And I think we need to be honest, there are projects that will be funded forever. I'm, for example, thinking of Sea-Watch type of projects that help support refugees in different ways. Like we have funded stuff that is used by the boats to coordinate in the Mediterranean Sea. We funded stuff about how to manage donations, to give them to people. There is never going to be a business model around that. What would be the business model? How would these people be independent? The only thing is supporting them to see how they can be efficient, how they can find maybe other funding. Maybe they can also have some donations. Can we support them in figuring out what type of donations? Because there's like getting big donations. For example, when people die, they say my money goes to this project is good, is one way to get big sums. Then there's all the micro donations from people who say, I give €2 a month to this and this project. And like you have all these models, but then sometimes it also just helps to say, do software as a service around your project. Like you can do this ticket shop, but if people want more support, you can run a faster, bigger instance for them, that kind of stuff. And we're never going to solve it, but we need to be ready to say people on the first day of funding, you start thinking about what you'll do the last day of funding, because they always want to start thinking about it on the last day of funding, and then it's too late because your money runs out and then you need to look for a job and then you give up on your project. And our job is to make sure to be that little voice in their heads to say, whatever you want to do, it's fine, but you need to figure it out now and not when it's too late. I think that's the big thing. And giving such structures with the 4 extended months of second stage that we're setting up is basically buying projects additional time so they can be paid while they figure out these things, because setting up a company, figuring out a business model needs help, needs coaching, needs to be paid while you do it. And we hope we can help with that.
Thank you, Marie. Verena, yes, you want to
Yeah,
comment?
happy to just add maybe a bit of my perspective, and Florin, if you want, you can also chime in, obviously, because you have this background experience that I don't necessarily have. So yeah, maybe when I heard that Marie and Patricia were actually able to provide onward funding, that was really kind of like like just a huge spark, right? That I would wish we would also have in Switzerland, obviously, because there's always this issue of sustainability. So maybe just like we select our projects based on based on several criteria, and one of those criteria also covers this aspect of longevity and sustainability. Like, has the project that is handed in or that people apply to us by, and with has it the potential to actually live beyond the prototype fund? And obviously we cannot, I think the problematic is that we cannot control that side of the project that goes beyond those 6-month funding period when it comes to funding, obviously. I think that from what I know now is that we try to keep in touch with the projects as far as we can, and obviously help them out also beyond the essential or like the core financing period. And then as regards to themes, I'm not sure, like when I was asking the founders about the kind of like the idea of the prototype fund, they didn't really talk about the themes so much. So I suspect that it was a direct copy paste from Germany. But maybe Florian, you can add to that. And I know that the first theme was civic tech, and then, as I mentioned, we had 2 years of public interest tech, and now it's digital efficiency / sustainable digitalization, out of those reasons that I've mentioned before, of this idealistic reason, obviously, but to some extent, we are obviously negotiating, or like we are in touch with those foundations who found us, and it sometimes is also a matter of finding a compromise with those foundations, as far as I can judge. But maybe, Florin, are you here? Do you want to add? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think it's exactly that. So it to some extent also just depends on the foundations that we work with. So they have certain topics they fund, and usually it's not technology specifically, but it's more like, I don't know, like sustainability or diversity or things like that. So in Switzerland, you have quite so the government funding in general. So the projects that governments do fund, they're quite limited, but you have quite a big, as you might know, foundational sector. So yeah, so that's kind of that's also why it's kind of like comes naturally that in or is kind of also symbolic for Switzerland for this to be funded, to be not government funded, but privately. But also as Verena said, we are currently working on that. So there's also a fund about to be set up by the Swiss government. It's a bit of a back and forth, but it's a process. Yeah, and also, I mean, for sustainability, I mean, I think we're kind of, or like sustainability in the sense that longevity of the projects. This is definitely something we have in mind, and we emphasize on. So it's basically the workshops we organize and coachings we organize for the projects from the very beginning. I think the second workshop we always do is kind of fundraising. So we try to raise awareness that you have to kind of, like, the projects have to kind of think about the future, or think about what happens after these 6 months already from the very beginning. So that's really also, I think, in the deeply rooted in the program. And yes, so far we were quite successful with that. I think there's definitely improvements that can happen, but I think it's also, as Marie said, it's especially also for Switzerland, it's a very much a systemic problem of how funding vehicles work. And they're always, everybody wants to fund like the new fancy schmancy thing, but nobody really wants to fund infrastructure or maintenance, etc., etc. But I feel like there's and also with, like, talking about Germany here, there's momentum, and there's these things are also changing. So I think that's a good trend, and I think it's also the right questions that at least in the funding landscape, also in Switzerland, that the foundations start to ask themselves. Yeah.
Thank you, Florin. Sadly, I don't think that's limited to Germany and Switzerland. I think that the funding that goes to the new fashion thing is kind of like a problem almost everywhere. But Ibrahim, you have your hand raised. You wanted to ask a question? I saw that you've written it in the chat, but if you want to unmute yourself and ask it directly, go ahead.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, all.
We can't hear you very well.
Good afternoon.
Yes, now, yes, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to ask a question, although it's just a concern. I just posted it here because I want to thank you all the speakers and the various countries. And for what I've had here, because most of the funding and you have given is based on Europe, so I don't hear somebody mentioned in Africa. So I just want to know if the fund is just specifically in Europe, North Africa. Yeah, it's just my concern.
I don't know. I don't need to go first every time, but I can if you want.
Sure, go ahead.
I don't think the prototype fund is set up in a way that we can change that. The funding, we're not like the top level funders. Like, we get funding to make prototype fund a reality. And for example, the ministry we are funded by is focused on interior of Germany, and there are other parts of the German administration that are focused on international work, but this would not be possible in the Ministry for Education and Research, which is very focused on internal affairs. So you'd have to set up a whole different structures. You can't just shift a prototype fund because they're set as very lightweight structures. They cannot like change the core of how they're built at their admin. But I think that's also not the idea with prototype fund. The idea with prototype fund is that it's so easy to set up that if you need a new one with a new approach, with a new region of the world, you can set up a new one instead of shifting one. And that you can like copy paste the prototype fund. We also really believe that it's not super healthy for the funding ecosystem to have only big funders. Big funders are important. They can do bigger things. They can do stuff like shifting to an area of the world, but they cannot, there will be single point of failure. Like if one funder shuts down, a lot of people are left without money. And that's the same idea with decentralization, where you have a lot of servers instead of one big one. And we need to achieve the same with funding. And so having a lot of lightweight structures, and we'd love to see prototype funds, similar infrastructures, or even actual prototype funds be in Africa. And if there are any leads, we're happy to support to set that up. But shifting is not going to be possible.
I'm happy to add my 5 cents here. I think from how I've observed it, and again, Florian, please correct me if I'm wrong, I would underline what Marie has said in the sense of the funding is limited to the Swiss ecosystem for now. But I mean, I know that I'm probably going a bit ahead of where I stand 3 weeks into my role by saying that if we got funding from a foundation who emphasizes the African Switzerland kind of like link, I don't think that Florian and I would be opposed to say yes and make this in a way happen together with African institutions. Like at least I wouldn't say no right away.
I think that's where getting funding from foundations is much more flexible than getting funding from governments.
Yeah. I mean, there's, I was trying to look for it, but I've recently heard, or like, no, it was a couple of years ago, I've heard about like a program that's to some extent similar and exists in Africa, like a civic tech funding program, but I wasn't able to find it now, but I'll be sure to post a link to this chat. Yes, I mean, it's obviously a big issue, and I mean, yes, you can talk about replicability, but I mean, if you don't, I mean, step one is really to get and secure the money, right? So if you don't have the money, I mean, you cannot start a fund, full stop, right? So so yeah, but I mean, I think it's definitely an interesting would be an interesting approach to think about, also work together with maybe a development bank or something like that to set something up like that. But I think it makes sense if this comes like, and it can also, we can obviously, or we could support, or someone could support, but I think this is something that has to come from there and the people rooted in the community or an open source community within those countries, right? So, but yeah, I mean, happy to support in any way if we can.
Thank you. Poncelet had a question, and then Susanne.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. I just wanted to, Poncelet speaking for the Wake Up, I just wanted to make a contribution that we can set up locally in various African countries something similar to the prototype fund, and that is by engaging, because sometimes you have to look within. In Joko Labs Banjul, what we did, like I'll give you an example, we have our open data portal for the Gambia, and based on what we did, yes, we got support through the Association for Progressive Communication, which were a member of the network, and I happen to sit on the board now of that network. But we're able to work with our Ministry of Higher Education and Innovation, and next year, in the first quarter, they are introducing a prototype fund that will help people working in creating open spaces for young people, especially for platforms that will be able to share content that leads to socioeconomic development. So I would like to encourage those of us from the Global South. Sometimes we have to engage with our governments and let them know what we do, and usually how I go about it is by dealing with my local member of parliament and telling him, and it so happens my local member of parliament, he also happens to chair the ICT Select Committee on Information Communication Technology. So it makes things easier, especially for, you cannot be seeking from outside all the time. We all saw what happened recently in the COP29, whereby a lot of countries from the Global South were screaming money is not enough and everything. But how have you on your own, what have you put on the table? Because that matters. And within us in the Open Knowledge Network, I want for us in the Global South to always think using the JFK speech, ask what you can do for your country before you know what your country can do for you. So we have to look at it and that way. And if we are able to share examples of this, which I'm going to share next year, first quarter when it happens, maybe other organizations like what is happening in Switzerland can look at, okay, this is a model that's happening. It also involves the government who want to partner to do something that there will be a peer knowledge sharing between Gambian young people and Swiss young people. I just thought I should make a contribution to that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can you share a link or anything about that initiative? Because I'm just very curious if there is anything you can share or I can read about it. That would be super nice. And I think the way the prototype fund is set up is you tell your government or your local funders, our community is very strong. Our community is doing really cool stuff and we're going to need money and we know this model works. So this is never something we can do for any other community than ours, because I don't know what goes on in Finland. I don't know what goes on in Algeria. I don't know these local communities. However, once you have talked to your government and said we need money, we're happy to come and say, hey, we're doing this in another country and it's worked. And if you want to prove that it works, we're happy to do that. But the first contacts in convincing that your community is awesome is always going to be a local job to do. And I'm super happy when I hear this is happening somewhere.
Thank you, Marie. Susanna, did you want to ask also?
My question, actually, I think it's got answered already in a way that I was wanting to ask whether there is some kind of structure thought of by Open Knowledge Foundation or the Prototype Fund of making this kind of prototype network, or like some kind of even thin structure or network to liaise between the nodes.
So there are two active nodes at the moment, and that's Switzerland and us. And we do talk regularly. And if any other prototype fund appears on the map or even prepares to appear on the map, of course, please come to us. And we've been doing like this handbook we've written together, where always making sure everyone knows people from the team and the other team and etc. There's always contact. There has been a prototype fund that was named differently in Taiwan. As far as I know, it was inspired by the German prototype fund, but they were so fast that they launched before the German one existed. They're kind of looking at this happening, or like, we're going to do this too. And then it was there before. I don't think it's active anymore. And I think there is a prototype fund coming soon website in Belgium from Open Knowledge Foundation, I think, or people close to that. But it's been the same since 2020. It's still coming soon, so I don't think it's happening. But if someone wants to pick that up, and in any other local communities. So we want a network. We want there to be a lot of prototype funds. Just build them and come to us and we'll all be a network. We don't think it's helpful to be all just in our little own organizations and not contribute.
Perfect, thanks.
And thanks, Susanna, and thanks, Marie, actually, for bringing this up, because this is directly bridging actually to the other topic that I wanted to talk to you all about, which is basically the Open Knowledge Global Directory. So the idea of the Open Knowledge Global Directory is, the project repository is basically like a little bit what you're describing, Susanna, like creating a network or a space for network projects basically to be showcased. This was launched a couple of years ago, and I'm going to put a link also in the chat, although it's also in the meeting notes. And the idea is basically to have a page where we can show the network projects. And here it is. I'll put the link in the chat, but I'll also quickly maybe share it with you so you can see what it looks like. The idea was basically to have a page where we could showcase all the major or main network projects in an idea of showcasing it externally, but also like having a sense internally of what is going on, and possibly replicating as well. So creating something like the prototype fund, if you go and have a look, basically, and you see a project that makes sense to localize for you, the idea is to have a place where you can sort of like look at that. The page is searchable by category, but also language and country. And you can select some of those, for example, data literacy, and you'll get a bunch of projects that are active, for example. The idea is at the end of it also you have a form that you can actually fill out to add new projects, but of course, being part of the network, you can also directly go to the GitHub repository where it is all hosted and just, open a PR and add your project if you want. Now, the thing that we are kind of like not sure about is like, is this something that is actually used and useful for you? So I wanted to launch a little poll here. It's going to be very quick. It's going to take 2.5 minutes. And I've never done a poll on Zoom before, so bear with me, please. I'm hoping this will work. It's basically just 3 questions that I wanted to ask you all. The first question, and I'll give you like 20 seconds, you just have to click one, is how often do you use the project repository? It's fine to say never. I mean, that's really like, we want to really understand if this is a tool that is used or not. So yeah, be very honest. And what we also want to know is, what do you use the project repository for if you use it? But also it would be interesting for us to know, if you don't use it, how you think you could use it. And then the third question that we wanted to ask you is maybe to tell us 1 or 2 things that would make the project repository more useful for you. This does not need to be exhaustive, just drop whatever comes to your mind right now. And there will be space also to provide additional feedback via another form that we will circulate together with the network recap. And I'll give you maybe 1 minute more. Okay, I'll stop the poll. So thank you very much for participating. We'll go on assessing a little bit the project repository. But the idea also would be for all of you, if you have like anything that you notice or that you think should be there, you can just basically open an issue on the GitHub repository. And I've added the link in the network notes, but I'll put it in the chat as well. Feel free to open an issue if there's something that, you know, if you feel comfortable enough, of course, of opening an issue on GitHub, you can just go ahead and create an issue there to sort of like flag things that should be different. And we're bringing this up because during the regional call that we had with Europe, a bunch of people from the Swiss chapter actually said that there were a bunch of other stuff that would be useful for them to see, for example, on the project repository, which really caught our mind. For example, the replicability of the project. The idea really would be for the project repository to be a space where you can understand, for example, okay, there's a project like Prototype Fund. Is it ready to be, for example, localized? Who can I contact, for example, to do that? Who could give me insight from their local team and all these kind of things. But we are on the top of the hour, so there's just a couple more things that I wanted to share with you. One is basically sharing again with all of you the network guidelines. So this is a document that basically captures how we work as a network. I would definitely encourage you to go and have a look if there's anything that you think should be changed there as well. This captures like the way that we communicate and gives like high-level explanation of what the network is, but also very low-level stuff like how we communicate. And that leads us directly to, we have a communication channel, which is Matrix, but we are not sure this is still the best option because a lot of you are not there. And Matrix is also slightly intimidating as well in the way that it's very technical, although it is an open protocol, so it really stands with our values. And so to end 2024 and to assess a little bit also our general work together, as part of that, we wanted to ask you your opinion also on the communication channels. So again, I'll circulate to all of you a feedback form. There is a link in the notes anyhow, where you can basically express your preference regarding that as well. Last thing that I wanted to announce, we will have an end of the year call on the 18th of December at 3 p.m. Central European time. I'll send you an invite just after this call, so you can already block it in your calendar. And also one other thing that I wanted to highlight is we are co-organizing again the Open Research Dev Room at FOSDEM in Brussels on 1st and 2nd of February, but there's also going to be an online version on the 15th of February. And by open research, we actually have a broad sense of what open research is, and it's not linked only to academia. So in case you're interested, the call for participation is open until the 1st of December. I'll put you a link here, and you will see it's very easy and straightforward. Last but not least, if you want your network updates to be included in the newsletter, please add them at the beginning of the meeting notes in the network updates by today, close of business. And the last also joyful thing that I wanted to announce is Open Knowledge Finland. Susanna shared that they updated their website. I'm going to paste it again in the chat for those that came later. We are 3 minutes over time, and I don't want to steal any more of your time. I wanted to thank you so much, Marie and Verena, for presenting Prototype Fund for us today. It was absolutely awesome. If anyone here would like to present a network project in the future, just ping me. We would be glad to basically show it here. And let's meet at FOSDEM. Absolutely, Marie. I'll be in touch. So yeah, thanks everyone. Have a good rest of the day and see you very soon. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.